Welcome to the SAFeTy Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTy Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the SAFeTy Chronicles. And I'm going to continue on with this resiliency and empowerment series. And this may be the last topic. Who knows? We'll see what I figure out going forward. But I want to talk about what you can do to help yourself when you are in moments of grief, when you are in a wave of grief. And, I am recording this on December 15th, and this is the second anniversary of the unexpected passing of my dad. So I'm going to be talking from experience because I have deeply, deeply researched this topic, but I've also walked it, okay? So whether it's during the holidays, during special anniversary dates, or even because of interpersonal violence, you can experience grief. Maybe you've lost a pet, you've lost a child or an adult loved one to violence. Maybe you've lost your home, you lost your job because of the threats and the stalking, or just simply the dream that you had of a lifestyle with a special person who turned out to not be so special. Grief can bubble up unexpectedly. And this is also for those of you watching who work in the domestic violence field. You work for an agency or you work for a shelter. Maybe you even work in animal protection. You can experience grief in your work of helping others. So I have personally been on a very deep grief journey over the past 6 years because of my parents. So my mom, I'll just give you a brief explanation. My mom went into assisted living December of 2019 with Alzheimer's. And she passed a little over 2 years later. And that was so hard for my dad and I to watch her decline because she was wicked smart. And it was just so hard to watch her bedridden that whole time. And then 20 months later, I unexpectedly lost my dad, December 15th, 2023, who I was so incredibly close to. And losing my mom, all we had was each other. And that was very unexpected. He was almost 86 and he was still working full time because he loved his work. So it just literally took us by surprise. From his first symptom to the day he passed was 11 weeks, and the medical system could not move fast enough to help him. Now, I have studied this deeply because I have an energy wellness business called Manifested Harmony. I have been working with different techniques to help process grief. And leading up to my dad's death anniversary, I have been experiencing pretty severe waves of grief. And I have done what I think is a really good job of processing grief. But here's the thing, grief never goes away. It just changes. and it can bubble up when you least expect it. So it's important. Here's your number one tip. It is so important that you feel what you are feeling the moment that you are feeling it. Okay, you need to allow the feelings to express themselves and not to embed or get stuffed down into our body because that will create a physical issue. Okay, let me explain. So we all grieve differently and in different ways and on different timelines in reaction to a loss. And a loss can be a lot of different things. Mourning is the outward expression of a loss, whereas grief is the internal expression, the internal suffering that we experience. You can go back and forth in the stages of grieving, and I'm going to talk about 8 stages of grieving that I have personally experienced. Most people talk about 4 or 5, but I have found that there's really 8 stages. What is really important is that you not linger in grief or linger in a stage because prolonged grief settles into the physical body, specifically in the lungs and in the heart. I mean, we've all heard of a spouse who became ill after the prolonged illness of their loved one, kind of wondering if that's what happened with my dad. And we've all heard of someone passing away shortly or immediately after their loved one was gone because it was so shocking to them. So let me go through these 8 stages of grief. And, I think we live in a world right now where everyone has grief over something. It could be literally the grief of kindness, the grief of a world that we once loved that isn't here anymore. There's all sorts of grief, okay? So let me go through these stages. So the first is anticipatory grief. This one's really hard because it is a stage when you know an ending is coming. It's not whether it might come, it will come. So somebody has a long-term illness and the end is coming. You are waiting for a diagnosis. You're in a holding pattern due to an unstable relationship, an unstable job, an unstable life situation. And what happens is you can become stuck in what is to come, and you are not living at all because you're anticipating what is coming. The second stage is denial. It is an instinctive reaction from shock or trauma when you're not ready to face what's happening. It can result in difficulty in making important decisions because the brain has moved into a protective phase. So you can't make decisions. It's really, really hard. I think of people who experience the sudden death of a loved one. Just 2 days ago, there were 2 horrific, mass violent situations that happened. One in Providence, Rhode Island, with a mass shooting at Brown University. And there are now, as I'm recording this, 2 families that have lost their child. And then in Bondi Beach, Australia, I've actually been there. Oh, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And now 11 or 12 people have lost their lives. And denial will set in that situation. And it's really hard to make decisions. And if you're in a violent situation and it's so shocking, if you find yourself struggling to make decisions, like decisions to leave, your brain is protecting yourself. May not be protecting you overall, but your brain has shut down because it's so painful. The third phase is anger. Inevitably, we will become angry at whoever or whatever we feel is responsible for the loss or hastening the loss, like with my dad. The medical system could not get its act together fast enough. He had a sarcoma, and that it was an aggressive, fast-moving, rare sarcoma. And they literally couldn't get themselves together fast enough. So he didn't even have a chance to fight. I was angry for a long time. We can even be angry at ourselves. And what it is it's anger for not having control to change the outcome. The next stage is bargaining. We enter the bargain phase when we pray or we take action to try to change the outcome in hope of regaining control over a situation where we just don't have control. This is the stage of helplessness, engaging in overactivity to avoid what is happening and feeling out of control to change the end result. The next phase, the fifth is guilt or depression or both. It's when you have feelings of regret about the situation, about things you did or said, or things that you did not do or say. It can turn into guilt. Guilt can result in repetitive thoughts that consume, that can cause insomnia, anxiety, and headaches. And I struggled with extreme insomnia the entire 11 weeks that my dad was declining. And then in the months after that, that I was solely responsible for cleaning out the family home of 60 years, making sure that items were donated. I don't like putting things in the trash, but making sure that things went to the right place, to domestic violence shelters, to homeless shelters, making sure that I could pass it on, and then having to sell the family home that I've known my whole life. And it took a toll on me with depression and even guilt of should I keep the home? I love the little town that I grew up in mid-Michigan. It was so safe and so quaint and so beautiful. But I feel like I would have been stuck in forever grief being there because my parents, the imagery, their energy is there. And I just knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So that is a real phase that you can go through. Number 6 is numbness. Oh my word, I was in numbness for well over a year. The passing of a loved one, coupled with all the obligations, the funeral, the memorial service, settling the estate, having to work, having to care for family. Whatever the grief is that you have, maybe it's moving, um, uprooting your life. It can result in numbness, feeling empty and you are just going through the motions in life. It's actually called functional freeze, where you appear functional, but at the end of the day, you freeze. You have no energy to do anything. So you engage in numbing activities. So now there are some numbing activities that are really destructive. Drug use, overconsumption of alcohol, any sort of harmful behavior. What I did, endless streaming of Hallmark movies. I'm a Hallmark movie gal, like constantly running at the end of the day, just literally frozen and scrolling TikTok because I'm in the algorithm on TikTok where I get a lot of videos about recipes, about cats, about animals, like positive, uplifting things. But I was frozen. I was numb. And that's a nervous system dysregulation issue. Now, it's okay to allow yourself time to heal and recover, but it's important to not remain in this phase too long. So once I realized how numb I was, like I just didn't have any emotions about anything, I had to start working to get out of that. The 7th phase is acceptance. So grief never goes away, it simply changes. You may always grieve what was lost, but when you reach acceptance, you have come to terms with the loss and you're prepared to move on and live your life. And the 8th phase is the moving on and happiness. So whatever you lost, a person, a pet, a lifestyle, those around us, even those who have departed, they do not want us to grieve and be sad the rest of our lives. So this final stage is giving yourself permission to find happiness, to find joy, to find optimism for the future. Because when you struggle to move on and find happiness, that energy just stores in you, and it really, all of these phases can create significant health issues. I see it over and over and over again. I did a lot of things to be proactive in my health and wellness. I mean, I think you all know I work a lot with energy healing, with crystals, with essential oils, eating, healthy food, getting out of the house every day. I have two home-based businesses. Right now, we're getting beautiful snow. I'm literally looking out my office window. We're getting another day of beautiful snow. We have had 36 inches of snowfall here at the lake shore of Lake Michigan in less than 30 days. It would be super easy for me to just stay inside, comfort, cozy, get the fireplace going. I make myself go out every day and to meet with people. Okay. So when you are consciously remembering happy times during the holidays, during birthdays, during anniversaries, during the death dates, the dates where everything changed. Here's my second piece of advice. Rather than focusing on the loss, focus on something joyful. Because when you can do that, you are moving on knowing that what happened in the past is making you who you are now. So if it's the loss of a person or a pet, they are always with you. If you are losing a home, a job, a lifestyle due to interpersonal violence, that's why I'm doing this series, to empower you to move in to the strongest, most empowered, resilient version of yourself. So your physical and your emotional health before grief happens can determine how long your grief process will happen. Grief meets you where you are, and then it progresses from there. And if you're having to deal with the grief of losing someone, if you're having to deal with the grief of a long-standing abusive relationship, on top of all of that, if you have had a life full of grief, your grief is going to be very different. And that's the thing, everybody's grief is different. And prolonged grief, if we do not process it and deal with it, it can result in depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, guilt, isolation, numbing behaviors, numbing emotions, eating disorders, concentration problems, addictions, low energy, no desire to do things that you once enjoyed, heart attacks, and unhealthy behaviors. And you will know that you have come out on the other side of grieving when you can finally accept the loss. You don't like it, you don't have to agree with it, you don't have to condone it, but you accept that it happened. You also no longer feel physical and emotional pain from the loss. You could still be in numbness, but you don't really feel the intense pain. You've also adjusted to a new normal, and you've moved on, and you don't feel guilty about moving on and finding happiness. So what are some things that you can do? And I'm going to share things that I did. I can only preach what I practice, okay? So number one, allow yourself to feel what you're feeling in the moment. If you stuff down your feelings of grief, if you push them aside because you don't have time for the feeling or it's inconvenient, that emotion will embed in your body. Not might, it will. I have studied emotions and the body and energetically what we are all about. It will happen. Grief embeds in the lungs, and people who have chronic lung issues often have deeply embedded grief that they have not dealt with. Number two, allow yourself to go within and not be as social as you were before a significant grief event. Okay? Don't push yourself to hang out with friends or go to a holiday party because that is going to require you to have a level of energy of socializing that you may not have in you. And if you have to fake it until you make it too much, that will wear you down physically and emotionally. Faking it until you're making it is not okay. It is important to feel what you're feeling, and that means caretake your energy. So it is okay to say no. It is, and I encourage you to do that. Number three, and I literally did this today as we're having more beautiful snow, spend time in nature. I actually moved from mid-Michigan to Lake Michigan to the shoreline to help me in my healing process. I mean, I started coming here 8 years ago, but almost weekly when my mom went into assisted living. Even in the winter, it's gorgeous. I would come here. And I knew I needed to move here because that's how I was going to heal. That's why I felt a lot of guilt in selling the family home and not moving into this home that my parents built and lived in for 60 years. My entire life was in that home, but it would keep me in a grieving energy. And I knew I needed to move to Lake Michigan in order to heal. If I'm going to give myself an opportunity to be happy and be healthy and have a life. Okay. Number four, you need to engage in extreme self-care. Okay. I'm not talking a massage or going and getting a mani-pedi. No, those are surface pleasures and they may feel good in the moment, but they are not going to feel good in the long term. I want you to go back to my podcast episode 44 about soul care and listen to that. It's important to put yourself first, otherwise you will get sick. And if you're thinking, but Allie, I have kids, here's the thing. Your kids are watching you. You're teaching them. And if you sacrifice yourself like a martyr and get sick, you just taught them to do the same thing. When you take care of yourself, you are taking care of them. Okay? So get comfortable with saying no, with removing yourself from activities and events that no longer bring you joy and that are not important in the long term. It is really okay to say no, and I want you to have a very healthy relationship with the word no. It's empowering. All right, what number am I on? Am I on number 5? When grief arrives, especially a grief date, a date that a person passed, a pet passed, a birthday and anniversary, a day that you had to leave a violent home. Focus on something joyful involving that grief. Okay. So today I was talking with a friend. I went out to breakfast because that's what my dad and I used to do. I went out to breakfast at my favorite breakfast place, and I was reliving some like really hilarious, happy memories of growing up and my mom and dad and with this snow. And I was talking about the blizzard of 1978 that hit Michigan, where I don't even know how much snow we got, like 4 or 5 feet of snow in a very short time period. And the snow drifts went up over our house, and my dad climbed the snow drift and went on the house. And like I wasn't tattling, but I went inside and I'm like, Mom, Dad's on the house. And she went out and was like, Henry, get down off the roof. And oh my gosh, it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. That's important to do when there is a grief date that has arrived. All right, number 6. I work a lot with energy and frequency wellness, like essential oils and crystals. And I created an oily crystal grief protocol. And if you are interested in having it, go to the notes below and find the link. It is a free resource. It's a PDF. But frankincense oil specifically works on releasing grief that stores in the lungs. You're going to put a drop in your hands, deeply smell it, like breathe in until you can't breathe in anymore. Hold your breath to let it expand, and then forcibly exhale and visualize the grief coming out. And a lot of times the grief has a color to it. Okay. Now you don't want to use a fragrance oil. You want a truly pure frankincense oil. I work with Young Living. Absolutely the best brand. And when grief is consuming you and you feel like you cannot take a deep breath, I had that happen a couple of days ago. I deeply inhale the blend of peppermint and eucalyptus because it expands the lungs, it clears out the lungs, and allows you to take a deep breath. Okay. And if you love crystals like I do, work with whatever you have. Lay on your couch, lay on your bed, play some soothing music, put on a Hallmark Christmas movie. Lay the crystal on your heart, which also covers your lungs, which is where we store all of our grief, and let your body absorb the frequency because, yes, it's a frequency. I teach the science of crystals. There's a lot of physics principles and frequency and how crystals work. Let the frequency be absorbed into your body. I recommend pink crystals if you have them. Rose quartz, rhodochrosite, rhodonite, what else? Kunzite, pink Himalayan quartz, pink Nirvana quartz, pink apophyllite. Go for the pinks. Pink calcite, mangano calcite. What are the other ones? Anything pink. Or green. Green is also a good one. Okay. And number 7 and last, and most of all, give yourself space and grace to shift into a new you, because the you that you were before a grief incident is now a part of who you are in your past, but it is not who you are going forward. Okay, you're not going to be sad all the time going forward. You will not be triggered by grief all the time going forward. You will settle into a new normal. You will go through all the grief phases and you will bounce back and forth. Okay, you're not just going to progress in a linear line, you're going to bounce back and forth. Because while grief never goes away, you learn to make friends with it. Okay? So, that's my advice. I hope that helps, especially as we approach. I mean, we're in Hanukkah, we're approaching Christmas, we're approaching the new year. You know, it's the death date of my dad 2 years ago. It can be hard going through the holidays where family is so emphasized. And if you don't have family, I hope this resonates with you. Find things that bring you joy. My house is so decorated with holiday decorations that I put up November 1st to intentionally help me through all of this. Because all of the lights and all the decorations, I mean, I got a Christmas tree in here in my office. All of this helps. Okay? Find what brings you joy and really dive into that. Okay. I hope that helps. Comment below if this helps, okay? All right, take care. And I don't know if I'll have another podcast before Christmas or New Year's. Maybe I will. But if not, have a healthy, happy holiday. If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing at SAFeTyProgram.org, call your nearest domestic violence shelter, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the Safety Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at SAFeTyProgram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.